Bill Ludlow, thank you very much indeed for coming back onto Evolution Soup all the way from Arizona. You're a member of the Geological Society of America and the Southwest Paleontological Society, and you're a volunteer at the Origins Gallery of the Arizona Museum of Natural History. Now, you've been on both of my channels, of course, Talk Beliefs, talking about creationism, and here on Evolution Soup, talking about new discoveries in the world of human origins. And today we're going to do a kind of a special looking at Australopithecus anamensis, the skull freshly unearthed in Ethiopia. But first of all, you've got some exciting projects on the go. Not only the Creation Science Fiction website, but now the Leaving Young Earth Creationism weekly live broadcast. So what can people expect from that new live broadcast?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting. The first one went really well this last Monday, September 2nd. I had Luke Douglas, who actually left Young Earth Creationism fairly recently. I mean, his transition was 2014 to 2016, 15. He was literally what we call a card-carrying member. I mean, he had the lifetime pass to the Ark Encounter and Creation Museum, and was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home, and now he's the executive director of our local humanist organization here in the Phoenix area. So he kind of went from one extreme to another. He had a great story to tell, and that went really well. And I've just been toying with the idea for a couple, 3 months now of doing like a weekly show, but I wanted it to be just more than just a random talk show where we discuss whatever, I kind of wanted something with a focus, but at first I thought maybe I had narrowed the focus too much. Am I going to find enough people? But oh my gosh, people are contacting me left and right now.
That's a great subject, Bill.
Yeah, and I did a poll on YouTube, and Monday night was the best night for me by far. And so how long should the show be, and how many guests should I have on, and what time of the day, that kind of thing. And basically, I mean, everybody says you really focus on one guest and do it at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and make the show really no longer than an hour if possible, and that just seems to be, it makes a lot of sense, so that's what I'm going to go with. And like I said, the first one went well. I've got some great guests, some people that most people have never heard of coming up, but they got really interesting stories. I've got a guy that hosts a fishing show in Michigan that's going to be on. One person that I just scheduled that a lot of people, at least on YouTube, that follow YouTube, would probably be familiar with is Michael Jones of the Inspiring Philosophy channel. So yeah, he's going to be on October 21st. So, and again, it's not just atheists. We have some theists that definitely will be on there to tell how they left Young Earth Creationism and how it affected them. A lot of them are affected in different ways. So
that's so cool, Bill. That's So that started September 2nd, didn't it?
Yes. Yep. Just this last week.
Great. Well, before we talk about the new Anamensis skull, I just wanted to ask you about this so-called Lucy Week that the creationists have been throwing out to the world. Now, you've been writing a lot, of course, on the Creation Science Fiction website, and you've been getting a lot of feedback on this, but what exactly is this, Bill? What is going on?
Well, what happened, I got subscribed to the Genesis Apologetics is the company, their email list, probably a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I got an email from Dan Biddle, who's the president. He sends out these weekly or bi-weekly emails, and I'll just read briefly like the first paragraph. It says, this week 6th graders across the United States will receive 1 to 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure he meant hours or days, but of instruction in world history class about Lucy, the famous Australopithecus fossil icon that leads the charge for the evidence for supporting human evolution. Students will make dioramas, life-size posters, and learn about Lucy's kind in the lineup with Homo habilis, Homo erectus leading to humans. And then he goes on to suggest literature and visit his website and watch the video that they've made debunking Lucy, et cetera, et cetera. And I was surprised because, you know, I kind of usually hear about stuff if there's something like that, because at the museum we'll hear about stuff like that. So what I did was I wrote him back and I said, "Hi Dan, can you provide a link to where Lucy Week is mentioned by the government or any public schools? I haven't seen anything advertised about it anywhere but in your emails." And he writes back, "Hi Bill, it's not a formally announced thing. It's just that most public schools in 6th grade start out the year and first couple of weeks going over human origins, and Lucy is the highlight." So I'm still, you know, I
wish
Googling around. I actually called our local school, 6th grade, you know. I called elementary school in our district here is kindergarten through 6th grade. So I called the local elementary school. "Have you guys ever heard of a Lucy Week, you know, human origins, 6th grade?" They said, no, never heard anything like that. So I write him back, you know, and I said, "Hi Dan, can you provide an example of that? You know, I mean, it's not happening in Arizona with the school I asked. Thanks, Bill." And one more response was, "Bill, it may not be happening in Arizona. Depends on where they teach the curriculum for world history and ancient civilizations, which at least for California begins in the 6th grade. And it's usually covered the first few weeks of school." He was just making it up. And I checked around. No one's ever heard of Lucy Week. Now, a couple people at the museum where I volunteer had read my blog or heard about, you know, saw my Facebook post. They thought it was a great idea. You know, this is a great idea. Yeah. And so we're joking around with the idea of making a Lucy Week. And I actually, I wore my shirt again in honor of it today. So see,
yes, I must get one of those.
And I wore this shirt a couple of days to the museum that week, and took my picture kissing Lucy's skull, and we just had a lot of fun with it. I was making Facebook posts and suggesting books by Donald Johanson and others, you know, that talk about Lucy, and kind of made a Lucy Week out of it, and we had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, it's just another example of, you know, a young Earth creationist fabricating something in order to create some excitement and possibly sell some of their merchandise or whatever to go along with it. So
yeah, and it's probably going to backfire, as you say, because now people are thinking, "Oh, this is a great idea. Perhaps we will have a Lucy Week."
Yeah, here at ASU, they have an actual replica of the Lucy skeleton.
Yeah.
I mean, you can purchase them, but they're, even through a company like Bone Clones or something, I mean, they're at least $2,000 or $3,000 to get something.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we're looking at possibly next year, the 1st of September, doing a Lucy Week, and borrowing it from them, and so at least when we do my human origins presentations and stuff, we can focus a little more on Lucy, maybe have some images and have the actual replica of the skeleton there. So.
And you could probably start off, you could do a show or broadcast or something and say at the beginning, "I just want to thank Genesis Apologetics for inspiring this fantastic idea."
Yeah, thank you, Dan Biddle and Genesis Apologetics. They put out some really well-produced videos, real slick stuff, but just really full of some pretty bad information. I mean, just the typical, young Earth creationist stuff about Lucy's pelvis was altered with a chainsaw and all that stuff.
That old chestnut. This leads really nicely to our main topic, because Lucy's species has always been considered descendants of Australopithecus anamensis, but we're going to find that it's even more interesting and complex than that. But let's just get an overview of the species Anamensis. Up till this new find, what's been known about it?
Well, that's the thing, up until we found an actual skull, I mean, we had upper and lower jaw, we had other fragment pieces of wrists and legs and that, but we really didn't have, and we still don't have a complete skeleton, but we really didn't have a face. This put a face on the fossil. And it makes a huge difference. I mean, now people, of course, there'll be forensic reconstruction done on it, and we'll get kind of an idea of what possibly they looked like. So, but really put a face on a very important hominin ancestor. So, in the past, we've had fossils from at least 20 individuals, but again, nothing complete. Not even a complete arm or a complete hand, Yeah. So we have pieces. The first fossil found that's now assigned to Anamensis was actually back in the 1960s, about 1967. But at the time, there wasn't enough data. It was just this unusual thing that was found out there. It was around the mid-90s that Meave Leakey and some others kind of collected all the data along with some new finds of the upper and lower the mandible and maxilla, the upper and lower, and then designated the new species, Anamensis. Doesn't really change what we know, but it also absolutely adds an awful lot more to what we know and gives it a face.
Like with a lot of fossil finds, they aren't announced until years after the discovery, so that they can be cleaned, studied, described, peer-reviewed, etc. Now, this skull was found in 2016 and announced only last month, August 2019. So what was the story of its discovery?
Yeah, it has a really interesting story. There was a dig going on, and not too far away from, a few miles away from where this was actually discovered. And the gentleman was, I believe, was cleaning, or no, he was digging a new hole in his goat pen, and ran across the jaw, and so at first it was hard for him to convince the paleoanthropologist at the dig to come and take a look at it, because I guess he gets a lot of dead ends, he ends up finding a big tooth or something, so, but I believe he actually took the jaw into it, the maxilla. Yeah, he took it to the dig site, marked where he'd found it, and the guy got interested. And not too far, when he finally hiked the 2.5 miles back into this farm and entered the goat pen, not too far from it, he found most of the rest of the skull. So the story goes he was jumping up and down and laughing excitedly, and people thought he was crazy, So, but I think anybody would be. It's a really important find.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they haven't given it a better nickname. It's MRD right now, so it'll probably be nicknamed Mr. D or something coming up, because, yeah, we got Lucy, which was a great name, named after Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. But again, it puts a name and a face on a fossil. We've got Artie for Australopithecus. We've got Mrs. Ples,
Littlefoot.
Yeah, Littlefoot. But MRD, like I said, maybe it'll be called Mr. D. I don't know, but a great story on the find. Definitely. Somebody stumbled across something, and luckily enough, they recognized that it could be important. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, we mentioned the relationship between Anamensis and Lucy's species Afarensis before, that the thinking had been that one had evolved, neatly into the other. But that's all changed now, hasn't it?
Well, yes and no. Anamensis is the only documented fossil we have between Australopithecus ramidus and Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis, as far as, hominin species like that. However, they were close geographically. That was one thing. You look at the Homo heidelbergensis and Homo erectus. Homo erectus overlapped with heidelbergensis. It overlapped with Neanderthals, even archaic Homo sapiens and Denisovans. So, we can have an ancestral species overlap, although it's unusual to see it in the same geographic area like that. So that is different. But by 100,000 years, Australopithecus africanus and afarensis also overlap by at least that much, if not more. But they're in different geographic regions. One's South Africa, one's East Africa. So, the biggest thing that we've learned in the last 20 years is that at any given time there were many different species around. So I think that it's not unusual. And what I know Tim White and some others are saying that, it's possible that some of the species of Anamensis became isolated or, went in one direction while some others, another population didn't. And so one gives rise to Afarensis while the other ones are still hanging out for a while.
Right. So this new find shines new light not only on the species Anamensis, but upon the whole genus of Australopithecus. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it does shine a light on differences between Anamensis and Afarensis, for sure. Some differences that we didn't know before. And it was very primitive, very small brain, in some ways close to Ardipithecus ramidus. And remember, Ardipithecus ramidus, there's only about 200,000 years difference, 4.4 versus 4.2 for the difference in age between Anamensis and ramidus. So that's not surprising that it would share some real primitive features with them, but it also shows some more derived features, closer to Lucy species, Australopithecus afarensis. We're probably going to find more specimens. They'll probably shed more light on it. I'm sure there'll be a focus on that now. But one of the things that we didn't hear a lot about, and I remember reading about it at the time thinking, this is kind of a big deal, but unfortunately there were no other fossils to go with it. It was announced back in 2012 in Nature that there was a hominin foot found at 3.4 million years old in the Afar Valley, where Lucy species was found, with an opposable big toe. So we're talking 1 million years after Ardipithecus ramidus, there was still a species out there with a big toe like our thumb.
Because Artie has that, doesn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. Artie has the opposable big toe, but we don't see it in Lucy species. So something was running around 1 million years later in that same area with an opposable big toe. Now, we haven't found any foot fossils yet of Australopithecus anamensis. Could that be Anamensis? We don't know. There's nothing yet that associates it with it. Now, it's kind of strange that some of the earliest fossils, or when they collected the information for Anamensis, they basically found some scattered fossils here and there, and based on the same age, they've grouped them together. But this one's even younger, Wow. This is even younger. So this is only 3.4 million years old, only 200,000 years older than Lucy. And her species, goes hundreds of thousands of years older than that. So it's going to be really interesting. It could be possibly that Anamensis had feet like Ardipithecus, yet with some features closer to Afarensis. So
a real transitional form.
Yeah, it is. One of the things is you see you don't see a gradual, you don't see a half opposable big toe, and I don't know that we'd really expect to see that, but again, 1 foot has been found, and it was discovered. It was announced back in 2012, and it definitely shows that there were other species around at that time, when Lucy's species was around. So this, if you take it, nobody has mentioned that in any of these articles. So, but it's not the first species or the first other hominin that we've discovered that would have been alive at the same time as Lucy.
So I think this is what they call they're calling the braided stream, rather than the tree. Of course, originally it was this linear progression, they thought, and then the tree, the bush. Now they're talking about the braided stream where things overlap and things branch off and then they rejoin again, a bit like what happened with humans and Neanderthals. Is that what's going on here?
I think so, yeah. And I think what we see, with what has happened with Homo sapiens, Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Denisovans is probably what happened also 2, 3, 4, 5 million years ago. We just hadn't found a lot of the fossils yet. It's easier to find these 50,000 to 100,000 year old fossils than it is these 3 to 6 million year old fossils. So I think throughout our evolution, or our ancestors' evolution, you're going to find that there were more than one species alive at one time. And the next level, I mean, once these have gone extinct, is a combination of those that went before them thereof. It's not always a step-by-step ladder-like progression, for sure.
Right. Okay, Bill, when we look at the skull of Anamensis, there appears to be a ridge along the top here, which I know is quite possibly a sagittal crest, which means there's a lot of chewing muscles attached to that, which reminds me of the Paranthropus line. So do you think there could be any relationship there?
Yeah, the timing is right. At 3.8 million years ago, and we see the Paranthropus emerge around 2.5 million years ago. So we know that it would have had a common ancestor with other species alive at the time, say Africanus, that would have had to have existed prior to that. And so the timing's definitely right. Now, that sagittal crest, like you said, it assists with chewing. I mean, it's basically a ridge that goes, across the straight back on the top of the head, and it's for attachment for just large jaw muscles. Our jaw muscles end here. You can feel them when you chew there, but they just go right to the top of their head, like a modern day gorilla, and to some extent chimpanzees. So gives them this big round face, and they have this huge jaw. So it helps them work that jaw. Again, the timing is right. It's very possible that Anamensis could have been, or something alive closely related to it at the time, could have been the common ancestor with Paranthropus and, say, Australopithecus africanus. Definitely.
That's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that means that they were chewing a lot of tough, sort of like, I don't know, tubers and branches, things like that.
Usually, that's what we're implying. That they're going to be herbivores and high volume of food intake and tough foods or grasses, chewing a lot. So need for those jaw muscles, to eat like that.
Right. So now we have a nice cranium of Anamensis to put on display in museums, nicely filling in that gap of hominid skulls that we see. So I guess it won't be long before you have a replica in the Origins Gallery at your museum. Hey, Bill.
I've already checked Bone Clone's catalog. I've checked them online, which is updated obviously a lot quicker, and nothing there yet. So I'm hoping that they get something out, because it would be nice. And right now we have an Ardipithecus on the wall, but for a basic human origins presentation, we start with Lucy. And I have a little sign up there that says "Meet Lucy," and one of the great reasons to start with Lucy is because so many people have heard of Lucy. And of course the children haven't, but the adults, if you're over 25 years old, or you've heard of Lucy usually. I mean, just somewhere along the line, if you were alive in the mid 70s when it was discovered and following any kind of news, you've heard of Lucy. It was a big deal, still is. So, it's always great to start with Lucy, but we are looking at doing a more permanent human origins display there, going back about 7 million years. Right now, everything we have is manned by volunteers. It's a hands-on thing where I can actually put a skull in a child's hand. They're all plastic replicas, of course, and while we're talking about it with them, and that's great. But so we have it manned about 5 days a week on average now. But eventually we're going to have a full display, permanent display of it, which, I'm sure we would definitely want to include something like this. Now, I haven't checked to see if they're available to 3D print. That's one of the new things coming out, like with Lee Berger's finds, Australopithecus sediba, Homo naledi. You can literally go online and download the files, and if you have a 3D printer or access to one, sometimes it might even be your public library that has those. You can go down and print yourself a copy of that skull. So that is, I haven't checked to see if they're done anything with 3D printing, but I probably would have read it by now if they, just researching it, that if it was available. But But yeah, definitely, I'd love to have that skull. There's some other ones I'd love to have too, going back to even older, but that one's going to be really important because it is so complete and it is so close and in line with Lucy. So,
and as you say, it puts a face finally on the species, doesn't it?
Right.
So that's a great thing. Thank you so much for coming on to Evolution Soup again to talk about this exciting new find. We'll be linking up again, of course, to discuss all the human origin discoveries of the year, and I really look forward to that. So again, if anyone's interested in following your work, I'll put links in the description below. And just end by saying a big thank you for championing evolution, science, and evidence.
You're welcome, and thank you. If I can add one more thing for those people that are going to watch this before September 21st, if you're in the United States, there's a Smithsonian Magazine Museum Day that's going to be happening. You have to go to the Smithsonian Magazine website to get tickets, but they're giving away free tickets to museums across the country. And hundreds of museums are participating in this. And I will be at the Arizona Museum of Natural History here in Mesa talking human origins from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. that day. But, you know, if you're anywhere in the U.S. and you'd like to go to your local museum, check that Smithsonian Magazine website for availability of tickets, because tickets are going pretty fast right now. But that's just a great thing for anyone that wants to plan something to get out, and it'd be free that day for you too. So
fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Bill, and hopefully catch up with you again very soon.
Thank you.